Welcome to another exciting episode of Humanity 8.0, a podcast where we talk about movements and initiatives that seek to move humanity to its next epochal iteration. This podcast is brought to you by Witlingo. When it comes to managing a community, one of the keys to success is the ability to effectively communicate with the members of that community. If you are a service coordinator or responsible for community engagement, Witlingo provides a multi-channel, multilingual notification and engagement platform to help you work more efficiently and effectively. For more information, please visit www.witlingo.com. That's www.witlingo.com. And now, here's your host, Dr. Ahmed Bouzid.
Professor Adam Rzepka, welcome to Humanity 8.0.
So happy to be here. I appreciate all of your work, and although I haven't followed the podcast, I have followed some of your work, and I'm very grateful to be invited. I just wanted to apologize to anyone who happens to be seeing the visual here. I'm in a remote cabin in Maine at the moment, so that's why I look like I'm in a sort of horror movie. and the connection should be okay, but you know.
That's fine. We'll make the best of our time together. Lucky you that you're in a cabin in Maine.
I do feel lucky that way, yeah, and I'm also aware of the fact that as a white male academic currently on vacation in a cabin in Maine, speaking to the relationship between practical politics, life and death politics, and theory, like, is a little bit accentuated. It's made a little bit acute by the fact of being in this.
Well, I appreciate
position,
I do appreciate the self-awareness, that's for sure. Which only makes you more of an honest person, I think, to engage. Because I think, let's just be honest, I think the typical, I don't know if I'm going to call it typical, but at least a good percentage of the professors out there are white males and so on, right? There's a minority, but hopefully a growing minority.
Sure.
And anyway, so you're a representative, but you are not representative in the following sense. And my audience, at least those who have been following the podcast, because I did a couple of episodes where we talked about how academics would just not engage on the Palestine question, right? So concretely speaking, and you were part of that piece that we published, I think it was in January or something like that, where we published 10, or it was 9 out of 10, because there is a story of the last one person withdrawing at the very last minute because they were afraid, which basically gave you a meta story to the story of how academia, and then we'll focus a little bit on academia, but then we'll broaden into intellectuals, has been extremely timid, afraid, and all of the adjacent adjectives that go along with that, as far as this
reactionary.
Those who didn't speak up are the ones that concern me the most. Those who spoke up, whatever, right? Because they at least they have a stand, right? And reactionary is the right word, I would say. Now, so the clarifying really topic here is, here is a situation where we're facing what I believe and what a good portion of humanity on this globe, on this earth, believes is a case of genocide. And it's not the only genocide that's happening around. I think something along those lines are happening in Southern Sudan, and other places, which even accentuates the question, which is, what good is theory and all these theorists and all this talk and dissecting, how societies work and how history evolves and all that stuff? How what use is it if it doesn't address, or is not even relevant, it feels to me? And again, this is where I need you to help me evolve a little bit. In a situation like, I'll get genocide, it's sort of clear cut, right? And one can explain why, for example, the Biden administration has been doing what they're doing. It's not complicated. People say it's complicated. It is not complicated, right? Anyway, so I'm going to, if you indulge me, so I subscribe to this TLS, Times Literary Supplement, I subscribe to the New York Review of Books, and I still do the paper, right? Because I love paper, and I've been doing this for 20 years, right? I'm just gonna go over one issue of the TLS.
What about the LRB? Not the LRB?
TLRB, I was at TLRB and it was too much. I was reading more than I should be reading.
It's a lot about British politics. Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
But here, I'm gonna go over very quick. Go on.
Can I make one just intervention right here before we
Yes.
get into the theory question, which is comparing the genocide in Gaza to the genocide in Sudan is also a tactic of supporters of the genocide by way
Yep.
of saying, hey,
Yep.
why do you care about Gaza in particular,
Yep.
as opposed to Sudan, all these other places? So as many sort of war crimes as the US government has committed in places like Sudan, we are not directly funding with your and my taxpayer dollars the genocide in Sudan, right?
Yep.
So we are directly funding and supplying in an atrocious and like unconscionable way the genocide in Gaza. And so that difference, I think, is
it's important, absolutely. And that's where an intellectual like yourself would come in and clarify things, right?
I mean, that's not intellectual theory. That's just political reality. Like that's just a matter of funding and weapon.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not even, exactly. Anyway, let me go through this little motion here, this little prop here. I wanna tell people what the TLS has been talking about. This issue is like, what is this? This is the issue in June 28, right? Okay, so an article about succeeding with access. 3 literary critics assail the cult of minimalism. Wow, important, right? Sentimental Education was a misunderstood classic. Very nice. I'm sure that you and I would enjoy reading this.
I'm not familiar with the article, so you have to read the title more slowly so I can process it.
You don't need to process it. I'm making a sort of a blunt
You're
point.
just saying it's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous
absurd.
and ridiculous. Every single one of those articles is basically just talking about stuff that that is horrendously irrelevant as far as I'm concerned, given where we are, right? These minds are reading these things. This one is New York Review of Books. Same kind of a deal. I'm not gonna bore you. Now, here, wow, an exception on June 6th, there was an article, the first article, I think, on the New York Review of Books about Gaza. Right? Is Israel committing genocide? Okay, you can't read it, but here. All right, that's the title. On page 9, issue June 6, 2024, obviously. And so, okay, what is the author? Does he say yes? He says yes. He says yes.
Oh,
he says,
great.
He gives a whole rigmarole here, obviously playing kabuki, right? The usual. To put themselves in.
That's like, that is, I'm glad he says yes, but like that is for the 100 readers of the Times Literary Supplement who actually read the article.
Exactly. That's number
and
one.
Maybe it convinces half of those. So you're talking about like 50 people or 100 people.
But my point is not that
it doesn't actually make any difference whatsoever.
Exactly. So there's a minuscule, right? And it's one amongst a sea of articles that had nothing to do with what's going on. And yet still, right? He says, let me read you the paragraph, right? So he does the whole thing, fair enough, right?
Yeah, no one is reading this. It's except you and
yes, and yet, just humor me. And yet, even believing all the things he said, I'm not persuaded Israel is engaged in genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. What has changed my mind, this is the important part, what has changed my mind is its sustained policy of obstructing the movement of humanitarian assistance into territory. Meaning he had to wait until June, right, to wait for evidence, because up until then it was not clear, right? Even though the last 75 years, there has been anybody who has been following it, from Edward Said before him and after him, all that, anybody who's following this knows what is going on. What is going on is a replica of what the United States did. A replica.
I mean, it would be amazing. Like I have never wished that Said was still alive more than I wish it now.
Yeah. Like, yeah. He would
I
be.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like, if you agree with that, if you think that if Said was alive, like Said is one of the most famous theorists of the 20th century and the 21st century, so 20th century. If you think that it would be good for him to have a voice in this conversation, then you really are defending the voice of theory. I mean, there is no one.
I'm not. Actually, I'll take it back right here and instantly. I take it back instantly. I don't think he would have been relevant. He would have been writing beautiful essays that are probing and insightful and so on. And he
Yeah.
would have been not read or not published here and there and so forth. So he wouldn't have made difference. So I do not, for me personally, I would love to read him. Just like I'd love to read Tolstoy, I'd love to read Dostoevsky. It's present and it makes my mind feel good. And that's what I think the theorist is doing right now. He's making people's minds feel good. Now, the reason why I say that, and I'm going to give the floor finally to you.
I think it does more than
Oh,
that for you. I think Tolstoy probably means more to you than making your mind feel good.
well, I would like to talk to you about that because, okay, it has made me a moral person, so on. A lot of people read Tolstoy.
Yeah, but you can't expect Tolstoy to intervene in the war in Gaza. Like,
No, but I'm saying that he is useful to me, and I know what I'm saying is whether it's Tolstoy or whether it's somebody who's living right now, it's the same thing as far as tears.
I'm giving you the hard position here.
Say that again.
I'm giving you the hard position. I'm not dialing back.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm giving you the difficult position here.
Yeah,
So
yeah, no,
but I mean life life is not reducible to political tragedy and political violence. I mean, and in the moments that it is, right, because for some people at sometimes it is reducible to those things, people tend to also want this other thing, this literary thing, this theoretical thing, this political theory thing.
yeah,
Right. Like, because like it's at the base, at the end of the day, it's the human resistance to nihilism, right? If the kind of violence and trauma that you're experiencing says to you the world is worthless and there's no hope, right?
mhm,
Where do you find any kind of hope?
yeah, but
Should you find hope? Like, the argument essentially, like, the argument against art and the argument against theory is the argument against hope.
yeah, but hope in what sense? Hope in what sense? It's
Sure.
akin to me. This is how I visualize, right? There's a massacre going on, right, down the neighborhood, and there's a whole circus and entertainment and singers and music and a lot of good food happening at the same time. And somebody comes and says, don't you want hope? Don't you want to have life? But I'm saying, look at over there. Can we at least, some of you guys who are dancing, so can we go and help them out? No, let's dance some more. Let's, in fact, put a curtain and let's put things in our ear so we don't hear it, so we can enjoy more. So when I go over these guys here, issue after issue, I'm not saying it needs to be only about genocide, which is like a fallacy, right? The fallacy of, oh, you want it all to be, no, that's a straw man. How about every issue should have an article? Is that too much to ask for? I don't think so. Let all the other ones, all the the intellectual self gratification happen. Fine, that's fine. But can we ask for at least a minimum? So for me, it has in a sense put me in this state of mind of being almost a nihilist, in the sense that screw all this art. Clearly, it's distraction, right? And I want to do away with it, and I want to give it its little place. A little place where when we have taken care of all the people who are addicted to drugs, all the suicides, all the military homeless people who have been like sold a bill of goods and destroyed, all those problems, then we can do art. Okay.
Yeah, but
Now,
I
now,
don't
now that's probably a very bad way of putting it, because art is a tool to help change things. Okay.
It can be, right?
Yeah.
So it sounds to me like your problem is not with art as such or philosophy as such, which of course we're doing. Like, this podcast is an exercise in theory.
Yeah.
There's no way around it. Like,
It's a conversation. I don't
whatever
want. I
else
don't want
we're
to talk
talking
about it
about,
as theory.
we are
But
doing,
the difference is you and I
let me
have some
finish.
guts.
We're doing theory for 55 minutes.
Whether I like it
Everything
or
you
not.
say, everything I say, it's political theory.
That's fine. That's fair enough. Listen, the thing is that at least you, right? That's why I said you are the exception. You are coming forward, right? You're saying something, you're doing concrete things, which we'll talk about in the future, right? You're actually putting yourself on down, and I'm doing the same thing. And that's a small, tiny minority. My question actually is not just about Palestine, because Palestine is sort of the thing that made it really obvious, right? I mean, if you're not going to stand against an actual genocide that I am financing with my own dollars, what am I going to stand up against, really, right? And so that's sort of the crisis of conscience that I have right now is, should I stop my subscriptions to these? I should. Should I stop reading these things? I should. What should I do? I should go and, engage in a concrete way.
But let me just take a moment. Let me take a moment to address that.
Yeah.
Right. So, there's the question of art in a time of genocide. There's the question of theory in a time of genocide. As far as I know, the question of art has been objected to. It has been formulated, at least like apocryphally, from Adorno, that you can't write poetry after Auschwitz, right? As far as I know, no one has ever suggested that people should stop theorizing politics in the face of genocide. Like, you're the first person I've ever heard who has really suggested, like, maybe we should stop thinking about these things because the reality is so brutal. And I don't think it's a tenable position, honestly. But I do think, like, you're holding up the LRB or the TLS, like, that's a matter of political and power structures, right? So who runs the LRB? Who runs like the Times Literary Supplement? Who writes for them? Of course, those people, like the LRB, which I read, right? Because I'm just a nerd who likes being bored. They used to publish Neil Asherson. People who were not just ignoring these post-colonialist aspects of these things, but actively supporting the wrong side, So it's you can critique specific outlets and specific people, but the question of I don't think the abstract objection holds, right? Because talk to any Palestinian right now who wants to make any kind of sense of the fact that their families are being exterminated. They will do theory. They will do theory. They will do theory in terms of what is Israel's interests? Why is this happening? How can we resist? What is the proper mode of resistance? What is the most effective kind of resistance? That's all theory. It just is. It's just the dimension of human suffering that.
Well, maybe I understand. Well, so maybe this is where the refinement is going to start, hopefully, to take hold in terms of my position, right? The reason why I'm starting from that point, very sort of rough point, is I see these students who rebelled against the establishment. Of course, there's a context and so forth, right? Obviously, right? But these are not folks who are steeped in theory. I don't know how many of them read Edward Said. They were not motivated by theory. They were motivated by images of children being slaughtered. That whatever the theory came afterwards, post hoc, maybe ad hoc even, right? They don't need the theory to do.
I disagree because I'm teaching some of these students right now. So some of the most active students in the Students for Justice in Palestine at my university, public university, many of our students, I think majority are first in their family to go to college. It's a majority commuter student public university. These students who are in the SJP, some of them took my theory class, right? My graduate level theory class. And they are the most motivated students in the SJP and in the FJP. I just attended a meeting of the FJP where only three students came to this, right? And of course, it's a faculty meeting largely, but the three students who were there were all theorists. They were brought into it by the experience of genocide and also by the experience of theorizing that genocide.
But
So
would you say that the vast majority of the folks, the masses, the people who make a movement, of course, there are leaders and there are people who think through things. Do you think that they are steeped in theory? Do you think that? I guess I'm not invested in any answer, really. I just want to evolve, right? So that I'm not arguing with you. Do you think that it was the images that pushed them to think hard questions and challenge the establishment and try to explain things, and where theory came in to explain, they start understanding that there is, in fact, for example, when they try to ban TikTok, all of a sudden the concept of manufacturing consent became a thing that the mainstream started to understand, right, folks? And I'm Twitter. I use Twitter a lot, and so all of a sudden, manufacturing consent becomes a thing that not just the readers of Herman and Chomsky, grasped back in the late '80s, but the mainstream, right? Sort of, it had to. It feels to me that if theory is in here, and I'm not casting it completely out, I'm just starting from the point of what use is it? If it came post hoc once they saw that there is something wrong and they need to explain it, like why is it happening, right? Before that, I don't think the theorists were like, oh, now I understand the situation. Let me go and look for situations where I can solve and understand because I have a theory. I think it was the other way around. At least it feels to me. What do you think?
I think that there is a human need to ask the question, why is this happening to me?
Yeah.
And the alternative is nihilism, right? So, and nihilism, I don't disagree that nihilism is justified. Like if you have most of your family brutally murdered, I would not begrudge you a nihilistic perspective at all,
Yeah.
right? But the more human and more common response to that kind of impossible to imagine persecution and death, in just like maiming and injury, is to theorize it. You want to know why it happened. You want to know how to address it. And that necessitates theory. Are the student activists that we see on Western campuses like Oxford or where I just visited, or Montclair State, which I'm involved in, are those people steeped in theory? Yes. It doesn't matter to me whether they're steeped in older theorists like Deleuze and Guattari, or they're steeped in their own theory, or they're steeped in new theorists that I don't even know about, right? Who are active on Twitter or who are active on Instagram. Like that's still theory, right? So again, I would say the abstract question here, that's a hard no for me. Does theory matter? Is theory useless? No. Every single resistant person is steeped in theory.
Yeah. And I guess you need theory to explain and also to be able to articulate your position, also to be able to recruit folks and be able to, right? You come up with strategy.
Doing it now, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me ask you this.
So
Since
it's more about theorists. Like, do you think that Deleuze is useful for this situation? Do you find inspiration in Deleuze, or not? And if you don't, that's fine. That's not the theorist that you need to use. No one should force these things. And so like when I teach my graduate theory course, I try to frame it not as like what you should think, but as here are three traditions of theory in the 20th century and the reactions against those traditions. Psychoanalysis, structuralism and post-structuralism, Marxism. Make of it what you will. That's what came before.
Yeah, no, for sure. I don't think I'll be able to function without, for example, a combination of Marxism and some Deleuze and some Foucault. That sort of makes it allows me to understand what's happening in a way that is real, meaning I can even predict like what's going to happen. It's almost like you can predict that what's going to happen because now the mechanism has been exposed.
Well, Marx is very useful for that, where it's like, oh, this is like basically exactly what was theorized.
Yeah, exactly. And you can see, how the reaction will be from the other side. You can see it coming. And so, I mean, Marxism is truly, impressive in its endurance, and
absolutely. And I think I'm glad you brought up Deleuze, because I think that Deleuze and Guattari together especially owe a huge debt to Marxism that's not really acknowledged in like 1,000 Plateaus and books like that. What those are theories, like as stated, they're theories of late capitalism, but they take up so much Marxist stuff that was just kind of like in the air, like the water that everyone breathes as a fish in France and
exactly. No, it's for sure.
It's like it seems like a radically new post-structuralist philosophy, but really it's a theory that elaborates what Marx said about the end stages of capitalism.
Yeah, and it's an interesting way of, but just they have interesting takes and so on. But I
Yeah.
still, even as much as I love Deleuze and all that, Marx remains really the master, right? Because he, when you read him, you understand what the hell he's talking about, as opposed to Deleuze, where you have to decipher his
Sure.
text 10 times.
But Ahmed, this is like I don't want to open up a new direction here, and if you're not ready for it.
No, go
But
for it.
well, there's something you love about Deleuze.
Hmm.
You just said that. What
Yeah.
is it that you love it? Because it's not political effectiveness. I don't think. Like it's not
Well,
activism.
yeah. Well, maybe my
Necessarily. So like I'm very interested in the affective dimension of theory. Like theory is full of passion,
yep.
right? And so I'm wondering, like, it's full of passion on the part of the theorists, whether they're probably on speed most of the time that they were like writing that thing. But like, it's obviously full of passion and energy.
Obviously.
And and when we read it, like generations of people, when they read it, are energized and passionate about what they're reading. And you've had that experience. I've had that experience.
Yeah.
What is the meaning of that experience?
You're asking me? Yeah, I can give you an answer. So for me, like, it boils down to the fact that he doesn't tell you how you should be or what is right and what is wrong. It's how to create. So he's all about creativity,
Mm,
and it has really affected me in the sense
I
that,
agree.
I challenge things like, why are we doing it this way? Why are these people following this when they could do it this way, right? So at that meta level, it makes me
Exactly.
excited, right? That there are
Yeah.
possibilities that you can rearrange things. I can rearrange. I'm talking to my wife. Let's rearrange the furniture. It's a whole new way of
Yeah.
living, right? That's the list
Yeah,
in a way.
absolutely.
There's nothing
Yeah.
profound really about it.
Put
If
the
you
armchair on the roof.
exactly, you have the possibilities are immense, and so it's exciting, right? It doesn't have to
I
be this
agree.
way.
I don't think that's meaningless. I think that affective dimension of theory and the reading of theory it matters. And the reason I say this, like I wouldn't have confidence in this if it weren't for the fact that my students see that.
Mm.
Like they get super excited about this stuff. And students have since the mid 20th century, which is like the most deadening, awful, abusive kind of theory. Like still like it opens up
Yeah.
dramatically free dimensions of political action and political existence. Like that to me matters, right? So the question of like, does theory matter in a time of genocide? Yeah, because there's nothing else. Like there's really nothing else. Like if you there's political action and you can do what you can do, which is not much. But every single young person you talk to is gonna be a theorist
Yeah.
when
Well, I
by
I
the time you
respect.
meet them.
I respect any theory that converts into action. But what I'm afraid of is it's either irrelevant, right? Again, and I'm evolving.
What's not irrelevant
Yeah, it's in a sense
because
that it is
necessary.
not irrelevant. If it's not tied to action, right? So you're theorizing and you're not taking that and doing something with it.
Sure.
You feel better and all that. When I'm talking about political action, right? If you don't figure out how to use theory to sort of shake the power structure in a concrete way, and have the passion and the courage is crucial, right? Theory by itself is nothing without, but courage by itself is just fire that might burn things, right? So the combination of,
Theory
being
by
Mhm.
a language. It's just a language of understanding, of mutual understanding. So
Yeah.
absolutely, like I do agree with you in the sense that like theory by itself is not politics. And I've spent my entire adult life in situations where people do readings of 17th century literature and say my reading is political, right?
Yeah.
And I've always said,
Yeah.
no, it isn't. It really isn't. Like
Yeah.
it may have political implications, but in itself, if you are reading like you're reading Shakespeare for race or reading Shakespeare for economic disparity, like, no, I'm sorry, that's not a political action.
Yeah.
It may
Yeah.
have a political past
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
what you're doing, but it's just not the same thing.
Yeah.
Uh, and
Now, like somebody
no
like
one
you,
should think that, but what I was saying is like,
yeah.
theorization on that level, including the theorization of art, which is just a conversation about how to understand art, appears to be a necessity. Irony for me is that we are here in this hour doing it while questioning whether it's necessary.
Sure. Yeah. Now, the thing is that both of us, again, are active. Okay. So I'm going to take whatever I learned from this conversation and try to convert it actually into making my movement, my mission, my whatever organization that I'm working with more effective. I think you are also the same. You're not just doing it like that. If you pick up, something here and there, it will make you more effective or whatever, or inspire someone. I guarantee you that's what you do because you have that mechanism of action plus, praxis plus theory.
Right. And this is a very old question in Marxism. Like, this is the basis of like Marxist Leninism is, do you need a vanguard party or not? Do you need an intellectual, theoretical party, a group of people to lead the revolution? Or do you just need, as like left Marxism?
What do you think?
As what do I think?
Mm-hmm.
I think it depends on the situation.
Well,
like,
well, let's take our situation.
1920s Russia is not the world we live in right now. Like, I think it depends on the situation. And that speaks to the relationship between theoretical and practical. But like, here's the thing, it's like practical theory is still theory, right? Like, if you're the Democratic Party right now and you're trying to figure out what to do about Joe Biden, it's like, that's still theory. It's political strategic theory, but it's still theory,
Yeah, it's strategizing. I understand.
Question with Marxist Leninism is, do you and I have any role in a theoretical revolution?
A theoretical revolution. What is that? Because for me, there's a revolution. A revolution means changing the power structure by using all tools possible, including language and theory and so forth, right? So, there's no revolution in my mind. There's no theoretical revolution. There's only a revolution that changes. Of course, there are revolutions in all kinds of ways, obviously, right? But the one that concerns me is a revolution that changes the way things are at the political level, right? So that we don't spend, 50%, whatever it is, like 20% of our budget on the military, right? I can see where theory can come in and explain why we shouldn't do that because in the long term and so on and so forth, empires explode because of that. I mean, there's a theory there that goes into history and explains how power works and so on. And then if there was an electorate that was listening, was not being interfered with, maybe we'll get people who are going to push that agenda, on the ballot and win. And then all of a sudden, so that kind of revolution makes sense to me. But what did you mean by a theoretical revolution?
I just meant that the revolution is not actually happening currently, so it's theoretical.
Okay, sorry.
Not a revolution in theory. Like, a revolution in theory
A
happens
theoretical revolution. Gotcha.
like, because theory is a free realm of thought. Like, you can really say whatever the hell you want. Like, there's no so sorry, and that's ironic for me to say it right now because, like, I, among other people, from a position of authoritative theorists, are actually being like shut down.
Yeah.
So you kind of can't say whatever you want on this specific issue of God. But when you then try to make sense of the reasons why that speech is being shut down, you're doing political theory.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Only recourse is political theory. And
absolutely.
It's the question that you raise is a really important question, which is, what is the relationship between theorization and praxis? It's a question that's haunted Marxism since the 19th century. It's a crucial question. It matters a lot. But it never has ever attempted to exclude theory.
Yeah. No, so I think I'm evolving. Let's just say it that way.
I mean, look, we're both evolving. That's the point.
No, it's fine. It's all good. No, let me ask.
Yeah, because I mean, you're reminding me of this. You're reminding me that this is a really crucial question. Like, right. So, as a kind of literary academic, I specialize in bullshit. I specialize in the ability to talk about almost anything, right? And I think that's actually kind of valuable in its one way, which is the opening up of new ideas based on especially ideas of the past that have been
Yep.
forgotten.
Oh yeah, that's huge.
No one else is teaching Marx. No one
Mhm.
else is teaching Marx to
Yeah.
class students. It's just
Yep.
me, just me and a couple
That's
other people.
amazing. I mean, the most
So
important
like,
thing, yeah.
but yeah, I mean, absolutely. If I'm also teaching Lacan, it's like, and we're talking about Gaza in class, like, what is that relationship? That's a super important question,
Yeah.
very dear to me, and one that I'm glad you raised.
So let me ask you, Adam, do you think that there is anything special about this moment? And I'll explain why I say that very briefly. Um, I'm impressed by the students, to be honest with you, right? How they
Me
organized,
too.
how they moved, and how they also, and this is what I suspect that there is theory, right? How, for example, they have decided not to engage. Like you've seen footage of these provocateurs going in there. Like what's her name? I mentioned her in a previous podcast. That lady from Britain, foreign who resigned, Indian lady, awful person. You know what I'm talking about. Braveman. I'm forgetting her first name. Anyway, she was going on campus on either Oxford or Cambridge. It was raining. Of course, it was in London. It was in UK with this person who was like an anchorman, and they weren't. It was an encampment, and they were going to the students and they were asking them questions, right? And the students just would not engage.
Yeah, yeah. Right. No,
Yeah.
I'm with you. Right. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
at Columbia, I think.
Yeah, and so
Well,
I think they have. I guarantee you there is theory behind that in the sense that there's a narrative, and as soon as you start to engage, they'll suck you to that narrative, and they'll frame it in a way where you look in a certain way. And so don't engage. You know, and then she was asking questions like, "We would like to know what your opinions are." What are you talking about? What you're trying to do, you're trying to poke at them so that you can
my
trap them.
opinion is that, yeah, you should not
Yeah. So
should
there's a
stop
level of discipline.
slaughtering children at the level of 1,000 a week.
Yeah, exactly. So there is a level of discipline. There's a level of discipline here across the board, right? That must have gone through some kind of a conversation, right? At multiple levels. They agreed that this is what we should do, because they understand how things work. They understand the narrative. They understand how it's being viewed by the media, the slogans that they should and should not. So, but let me go back to the question, which is, do you think there's anything unique about this moment in the fact that it seems to be a bottom up? It is a little bit different, I would say, from, for example, Vietnam, in the sense that they are not directly implicated. Those guys, they were going to be drafted, or their son, or their brother or sister, or so they were like self-interested in a direct way, right? Of course, I
Sure.
don't think it's reducible to that, of course. But I think in this
I
here,
mean,
they could easily ignore it, right?
matters matters a lot.
Yeah, I mean, they could simply just focus on their career. Most of them come from Columbia. I mean, it takes a lot of money to get there, right? So these are
Yeah.
middle class, upper middle class, perhaps students who may as well just play along, but they didn't play along, and so that's for me. I've been trying to think about whether this is anything unique here or not, and so I want to ask you: do you think there is a unique moment here, an opportunity, something really new? And then still is the newness is always intriguing to me. Something new
Yeah.
here. You go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I do think there's something dramatically new here. I was just, and again, I'm very aware of very aware of the fact that, like, I'm on vacation in Maine, and I'm about to tell you about a research trip to the Bodleian Library at Oxford, which I was sent on for free, right? But when I was at the Bodleian last month, um, the it's like this iconic library where it just is the instantiation of like a mystified colonialist tradition, but it's like the circular library at Oxford, right? It's just from like Philip Pullman to
You
like
can taste it.
everything else. It's just like the center of earth as far as privilege.
You can
you know,
smell
and
and
it's surrounded currently.
right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you can smell it, right? Like you can see it, you can smell it. You are inhabiting the sort of navel of
Yeah.
colonial privilege in the world, and it's surrounded by tents right now,
Yeah.
surrounded by students who are Oxford students. And I talked to them every day and went there and like was like, hey, I'm from this like public school in New Jersey. They would love to talk to you. The fact that like the Bodleian Library is currently surrounded by Gaza encampment tents, I do think that's new.
That's an amazing
I do
symbol.
think that's new.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
these kids are not ignorant of, and neither they don't give any concessions to theory either. Like they've read Frantz Fanon, and they also understand that Frantz Fanon was writing in the 1940s or 1950s. Like
Yeah.
they understand that something else is needed. And you know what? The best thing about it was they're totally comfortable with it. This anxiety that you and I are discussing in this hour really doesn't apply to them. It's about strategy. Um, and it has a background of theory that I do think matters. It matters that they've read
No, I
Fanon.
agree. I agree.
Matters that they've read Deleuze.
Yeah.
But like, day to day, they're not thinking about that stuff. They're thinking about
Yeah.
like media relations and like who they're talking to and like who they're connected with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that to me is something approaching the ideal biosynthesis between theoretical politics and on the ground strategic politics or tactical politics. Like I think they've kind of nailed it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I wouldn't, if it was my case, there's nothing I'd hope for more than that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it feels like they figured something out, and now at the strategic level, and now
Yeah,
they're minding, which is what I respect really, is this combination of strategy, and they're minding the tactics, they're minding the logistics, how to
right,
eat and how
right.
to ensure that which I find pleasantly surprising, given that that generation has been really disrespected in the sense that these guys are glued to their phones and they don't think, and they
Yeah,
just
yeah.
scroll up and down. It turns out that actually, no,
Right.
that's not true at all.
Well, it
Um,
turns out that's part of what they were doing on their phones.
exactly. Right?
Is like figuring out a new way to do politics that we don't understand.
And being exposed to, without mediation, it feels, to data points,
Yeah, I mean,
without,
again, I feel like I'm unqualified to address that point.
we're
Like,
just theorizing,
I'm
if I may use that word.
not even on social media. Like, I've never been on Twitter or Instagram or anything. So I'm like the or old person in that sense. But I'm aware enough to like see that these are grown-ups, they're adults, like
Yeah.
they're like 19 or 20 years old, like who are deeply familiar with and adept at whatever the media environment of their time. It shouldn't be dismissed. And I think like it's kind of a reactionary position to say like, if you're the Biden administration, like, well, shut down TikTok, like, I don't know, who knows? Like that's not real, like I'm just gonna always take
Yeah. You,
those people's words for it, like the
yeah,
younger generation, like what do they say,
yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not gonna just be like, yeah, you guys are absorbed in your bullshit.
You've been listening to Humanity 8.0 with your host, Dr. Ahmed Bouzid, founder and CEO of Witlingo.